Well, it's mid-December, we're Indianapolis Colts fans, and as per usual, this team is sitting around 500, which means it's about the time of the year that we have that discussion that we always have amongst each other. And no, I'm not talking about all the goals that we have going into 2025, okay? Listen, I love that you have goals. I have goals too, okay? That's one thing we can bond over. And no, we're not talking about doing the last-second Christmas shopping for your family. In fact, hopefully, you've already got most of that done because inventory probably running low around your area, right? Here's what we're talking about. We're talking about Chris Ballard's job security with the team. Of course, right? The question at hand is simple. Is Chris Ballard's job as the Colts GM dependent on a Colts playoff berth this season, which obviously hangs really in the balance of the outcome of this Broncos game we have coming up, which we'll talk about tomorrow? Or really, maybe I should frame the question as this. Not is it dependent on that, okay? That's besides the point. Should Chris Ballard's job be dependent on a playoff berth this season with the Indianapolis Colts? Because on one hand, you're going to have the side of people, right, that say right now as a GM, he's currently 60-67. That's below 500 in a very, very large sample size. No AFC South title, only one playoff win. And then on the other hand, you're going to have the people that say, well, he inherited a tough situation with Andrew Luck. And you can argue that if that didn't play out how it did, there's a strong chance that we would have a winning record and some playoff success and an AFC South title, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And then those people that don't feel that way could reply, well, listen, he's had plenty of time to figure out the Andrew Luck situation. That was so long ago that he retired. I mean, how long could we possibly give him to figure that out? He can't have that excuse forever. And you know what? Okay, fair enough. You have facts on both sides of this thing, right? That's why it is such a passionate debate amongst Colts fans, because realistically, there's merit to both sides of this, opinion. I don't even know what to call it. In fact, I think that would be exactly the word out here forgetting English all of a sudden. That's what happens. But the reality is that both sides have fair arguments, and it comes down to kind of which ones hold a little bit more weight with you and what that's related to. I don't know. We're not going to psychoanalyze it. Not really the point of the episode. Many of you who have been with the show for a period of time know pretty much where I've stood with Chris Ballard, and the fact that I've thought, generally speaking, when Colts fans get upset about Chris Ballard, I consider it mostly an emotional response. Again, not without any validity whatsoever, but also I just look at it and say, listen, come on now. We're being a little bit emotional. But as time has gone on, I do kind of understand the fact that, hey, I mean, as much as I want to defend him and as much as I think the Luck excuse is a valid one, the truth of the matter is, well, how long can you possibly hold on to that excuse? Now, the goal of the episode today isn't so much for me to take a side on this debate. It's actually to try to present questions for Colts fans on both sides of the aisle on this topic to consider, a little bit of food for thought, and perhaps you even question where it is that you think you stand absolutely on this issue, or maybe not. I mean, maybe we just talk about the Colts, you have your opinion, and then you foam at the mouth and say something angry in the comment section. I don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to talk about it all. Before we do, you know what it is. My name is Justin. This right here is the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. As always, ask anyone watching on YouTube and enjoying the show, go ahead, shoot it a like. It's going to help us get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Of course, audio listeners, leave a five-star review. Let the people know how much you like the show. Subscribe if you want to be a part of the journey. We're trying to get to 3,000 by the end of the season. We don't have a whole bunch of time left, but hopefully it starts today. If you keep coming back and you enjoy the content that I am bringing to you about this team, you think that perhaps I'm bringing a different perspective on the Indianapolis Colts, there's something to that effect, maybe today's the day you subscribe. But most importantly, I ask you to enjoy the show, react in the comment section if you so choose, and talk amongst each other and be civil with one another. You don't know what the person on the other side of the monitor, the keyboard, is going through that day. We like to make it a safe space, not to be a bit of a snowflake, but in actuality, let's be kind to one another, okay? So back to what we're talking about. Chris Ballard, food for thought, and some of the things you want to consider when you really say, we got to get rid of this guy. One of the things right off the bat, I do have to ask you, and maybe, you just think about it as you go, right? Because there's quite a few questions I have here. One, Do you fundamentally disagree with Chris Ballard's philosophy on team building? And I'm not talking about his aggression and kind of his approach from how you acquire the talent, but I'm talking about from a personnel standpoint. Do you believe in the fact that you build a team from the inside out or from the trenches, right? The offensive and defensive line, that you start there and then build out to the perimeter and the skill positions? Or do you feel that in today's NFL, that you actually build from the perimeter in, and that it's more important to have a high quality set of receivers and corners, and that the offensive and defensive line, not that you don't need them, but it kind of becomes secondary to those things with the way the game has evolved? And I'm not sure if there's 100% a right answer to that question. You could probably, if you looked into it, find success on both sides of that. But whether or not you support Chris Ballard and have some level of patience with him likely comes down to where you stand on that. So I will ask you again, and then I'm curious to hear what you think. Do you think that the offensive and defensive line is more important than the skill positions? Or do you think that the skill positions are more important than the offensive and defensive line? That's one thing to consider. Another thing to consider, if we were to can Chris Ballard and get rid of him, right? Wave a magic wand. Ooh, is the microphone still? Hold on. Let me see. Are we still connected? A little test, test, test. You're watching me do sound in real time. Okay. Yes, we are still connected. Audio listeners, I just smacked the microphone talking with my hands like a psychopath. But that's neither here nor there. Back to the content of the episode. If you could wave your magic wand, right? That's the waving of the magic wand is what smacked the microphone. What would you want our next GM to do differently? Like, would you just want them to be more aggressive in nature? Is that what it is? Are you sure that if you fire Chris Ballard, that the grass is greener on the other side? You think about this idea of aggression, okay? And you look and listen. You have cases, right, where you have a team like the Rams, if you remember when they made their Super Bowl run, they pretty much leveraged their entire future to bring as much talent as humanly possible into that team and say, we are going to win this thing right now. And it worked out for them at a very high level. But for every one of the Rams, you can argue that you have the Jets, the Jaguars, the Titans, right? I think so much was made. Of course, the Jets, I mean, we could speak ad nauseum. I live in New York myself. What a horrible, just the worst, right? You go to MetLife Stadium, there is something, this is a digression, of course. When you go to MetLife Stadium, I went for the Colts-Jets game this year. There is something tangible in the air at MetLife Stadium that's kind of just hard to explain, but there's an energy that is just, you could not help but feel it if you were in the building. I'd imagine many of you have not felt it because there's only so many of us Colts fans in New York, but trust me, it's a thing. Regardless, besides the point, I'm talking about the aggression of kind of an organization and a GM and getting talent, right? Look at the way the Jets sold out for Aaron Rodgers, and look at how that played out for them. You look at the Jaguars, incredibly active this offseason. Look how it played out for them. The Tennessee Titans, I mean, all types of people, including L'Jarius Sneed, were acquired by that team, who every Colts fans and their mama wanted. And look how it's worked out for the Tennessee Titans, right? When you go all in that way, sure, you do kind of leave yourself open to the possibility of having a Rams-type run if you do everything correctly. But on the flip side of things, you leave yourself exposed, and the bottom could fall out, and it could fall out with no foundation, right? Because you've kind of sacrificed a level of sustainability for kind of this one brief window. And listen, if that's your jam, that's your jam. But the question to you is, are you sure that that scenario is better than the one that we have found ourselves in with Chris Ballard? Are you sure? That's all I'm asking, is that if you're 100% sure the grass is greener on the other side, that's something to consider when you think about the idea of getting rid of a Chris Ballard. And speak of kind of on the same topic, another thing to consider or think about, and it's an honest question, and one that maybe sounds simple on the surface, but I think is necessary to make a distinction on. What exactly is a general manager's job in kind of, what's their role in making a successful football team? Because they certainly don't go out there and play, right? In terms of the week to week, how involved are they? Of course, they're not coaching, right? They're not actually out there on the field sacrificing their body. So what only the only thing that's left is to put a roster together that has a chance to go out there and compete. And unless you're literally the best of the absolute best at that job, which you could literally count on one hand, it's not like you're going to have such a can't miss roster with no holes. I mean, even the 49ers right now, you look at and are kind of in a situation, and John Lynch, one of the greats at GM right now, Howie Roseman, another one, they're not without mistakes, right? So there's no such thing as perfection. We understand this. But in terms of, has Chris Ballard done the job of putting a roster out there that has a chance to win games? You can simply make the argument, well, they haven't won games, so clearly he hasn't done that. But let me ask you it from a different light, right? I'm not saying that's wrong, by the way. I'm just, again, food for thought. When you look at the players on the Colts currently right now, you look at every single unit. How many players, I'm talking starters on both sides of the ball. Now, you could say we could use more depth, but then you're kind of taking the Chris Ballard side of things where you got to build the depth in the competition. I'm talking about the starters. How many of them are you 100% certain that you can upgrade in any given offseason? Like if you're going into this offseason right now, how many guys starting on the Colts right now do you think you could get a better player than? Can you do better, definitely, than call it Michael Pittman and Josh Downs? Can you do better than their offensive line? Can you do better than Jonathan Taylor? Can you do better than the talent that they have on the defensive line? You look at the linebackers, are you 100% sure you could upgrade there? You look at the safety group, are you 100% sure you could upgrade there? You get my point. You look at the corners, are you 100% sure? Not to say that we couldn't improve there. I'm asking, are there anyone, or is there anyone starting on this team that is just surefire, has no right starting on an NFL football team? I'm not answering the question for you, but I kind of have a feeling that as I said that, you started thinking of the players that we have there, and you say, not for anything. We got a couple of good players on this team, right? We don't exactly lack top end. Well, maybe we lack A-plus talent, but we don't have scrubs out there playing on the Indianapolis Colts. I think that would be fair to say, right? Just something to consider, right? When you think about saying that he has done a poor job building the roster, listen, you may very well have gone through the same exercise I just did and come to the conclusion that he did build a poor roster. But I will say, even though I said I wasn't going to take a side, I can't help but be transparent. I can't look at the Colts roster and say it's a scrub roster. I mean, if you put a big-time quarterback on this roster, an experienced one, I like the guy we have. But if you were to put someone like a Matt Stafford on this Colts roster, are they winning games? I don't know. Yes, no, maybe. I have no clue. I'm asking, right? I'm literally just presenting the thought, and you can answer it for yourself, okay? And now we take it to the side, speak of quarterback, of Anthony Richardson. Is firing Chris Ballard good or bad or net neutral for Anthony Richardson? Like, you got to think about it at this point with all the issues we've had at the quarterback position as Colts fans. Got to ask yourself, right now, handling this football team, what is best for Anthony Richardson? That guy is our only chance right now. I mean, of course, unless we throw him out to the Wolves and get a different guy, but you get my point. That young quarterback, Anthony Richardson right now, maybe someone else in 5 years, really not the point. I think it's going to be Anthony Richardson. But you got to ask yourself, what is best for him? Is firing a general manager the best thing for him? Like, firing a general manager results in a level of instability, right? It results now in a guy coming in who now has a roster and a coaching staff that he inherited as opposed to got himself, meaning that they aren't inherently aligned perhaps with his vision. Does that divide and that separation cause issues? Well, it's not guaranteed, but it's certainly within the realm of possibilities. And is stability more important for a young quarterback than just about anything else? Off the top of my head, I mean, it may very well be the most important thing. You think about quarterbacks who have failed, right? You get drafted in the top 5. It's not because you lack talent. If things don't work out for you, sure, sometimes it is that the quarterback wasn't good enough, but many times it's because the foundation that was in place was not strong enough for that guy to succeed. So the question is, if you fire Chris Ballard, when you think about it from that perspective, and I'm not answering this question by asking it, I'm not saying the answer is yes to this question. I'm literally asking the question. Does firing Chris Ballard at this point in the franchise where we just got Shane Steichen as a coach, who most of us believe in, we just got Anthony Richardson, who we know needs to be nurtured and have a foundation behind him. Does firing Chris Ballard actually do the opposite of what you guys intend? Because make no mistake, we all want the same thing. We want the Colts to be great. Does firing Chris Ballard actually set the franchise back even more than keeping him? Something to consider, right? And these are all the things that we're going to have to consider before we go into this Broncos game. Well, I guess really after this Broncos game, if we lose, if we win, we get to keep the hope alive a little bit longer. I believe as it currently stands, as according to Colts Cove, by the way, on Instagram, for those of you who don't follow him, worth a follow. In terms of providing like meaningful stats, I mean, he finds some very good stats. I don't know where he finds them. He's a little whiny about the team sometimes, but more power to him. I have a lot of, I'm a fan of his page. In fact, why did I say that? I don't know if he listens to the show. Sorry, bud. I do think you're whiny about the team, but you provide good stats. Why did I do that? Whatever. Colts right now going into the week against the Broncos, a 28% chance of making the playoffs. With a win, I believe it's 69%. And with a loss, it's like less than 10%. Okay? So a lot rides on this right here, but I figured we could facilitate a discussion about Chris Ballard as we normally do. And listen, there's the reality that you guys came into this episode and you had your mind made up and nothing I said made you think. But maybe there's a few of you that some of the stuff I said did make you think about things a little bit differently. And I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. But until next time, my name is Justin. This right here was the Ride on the Bench Colts podcast. And as always, go Colts.